All right, thanks for clicking into this video. We're going to be tackling the upper and lower front ball joints on my C6 today. One thing I did want to call out at the beginning of this video is as you're going through other videos, you don't need to take the whole control arms off, upper and lowers. The upper control arm, taking it off the car is easier. The lower control arms, the shock, none of those need to come loose. I did have a couple extra steps just because one of the bolts for my hub to my spindle was loose, so I did have to do a little bit extra work there. But most of the stuff you can still do with everything bolted up to the car. It is going to be easier to take everything off, but then again, that's more things that are going to factor into your alignment that you would need to then mark or do very carefully. Otherwise, yeah, let's go ahead and get into the video. All right, so now we got the wheel off. I'll go over kind of what's going on and what my order operation is. I have done the driver's side already and hopefully learned all my lessons. And it should be pretty straightforward. So first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and free up this jam nut. It's I believe an 18 millimeter. I'm gonna go ahead and break that loose and spin it off half a turn. Before I do that, I am going to mark it just so I know where to tighten the new tie rod back into. After that, I'm going to go ahead and break this loose for the outer tie rod, pop it out of the spindle or the knuckle so I can get this out of my way. After that, I'm going to flip around over to the brake caliper mounting bracket. So this is a 22 millimeter. I'm gonna take that one and the one below it off. And I'm just gonna take the entire caliper and the mounting bracket off. And I'm just gonna tuck it away on top of the leaf spring over here, just so it's out of my way. I am gonna just put I might put a zip tie on it just to make sure it doesn't fall out. After I get this out of the way, I'm gonna pull the rotor off and start getting into where I actually need to do stuff. I have learned that if you're able to break stuff loose while stuff is still connected, go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get jam nut, tie rod, nut, and caliper off, as well as the rotor. And then I'll come back after I get those things broken loose and popped out. All right, so we've got the rotor off, got the caliper off, and now it's time to start getting into the fun part of it. I've already broken the jam nut loose. I backed it off half a revolution, so basically 3 flats. I've got this broke loose as well. So now I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect this ABS sensor. So I can go ahead and get it out of the way so I don't accidentally damage it. Just gotta pull this out of its retaining clip. And once that's out of the way, I just tuck it up in towards the engine bay where it's safe from any of the silly things that I may or may not do. So get the tie rod separated from the knuckle. You can use a separator tool, or you can use the tried and true hammer method. As far as separating the control arms from the ball joints, those I would not recommend using a hammer. I would actually press those out or use a separator tool. Tie rod, Maybe right, maybe wrong. Yeah, so based on that, I'm gonna use the tool. I'll go ahead and grab that and get it set up. All right, so for the separator tool, basically you get the fork underneath, have the movable side up on top. I just put the jack underneath, take some pressure off to make it easier, and after I did that, it ended up coming straight free. But if you needed to, you just run that bolt in. It's gonna push this up and push the bolt part of the tie rod down. So I'm gonna just leave this kind of off to the side. There is some heat material, heat shield on here, but this boot on the tie rod is pretty well shot. The driver's side looked exactly the same. Yeah, so that's off now, and I'm gonna go ahead and transition into the ball joints themselves. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to go ahead and take off the upper control arm bolts, and that's gonna allow me to pivot everything towards me, and hopefully that's gonna go ahead and let me get to all of these bolts a little bit easier. One thing I do wanna call out, I don't know if this is a GM thing or someone was in here previously, but not really sure how the heck am I supposed to get that out to the lower wheel hub. Bolt is effectively locking the ball joint nut. So that's gonna be a fun one to get out. All right, so actually we'll get to show the ball joint separator. So yeah, the fork side's up top right here. That pivot point is down on the actual bolt. And we'll go ahead and take impact and drive this in. And all that's doing is basically going to be pulling this control arm down while pushing the ball joint up. So that's gonna go ahead and get me free off the upper control arm. After that's done, everything else will be able to pivot out to me easily. I might not need to actually take the upper control arm bolts loose. I expect on the reinstall, I'll need to have those loose just to have a little bit of wiggle room to get this ball joint lined up. All right, didn't need to run it as far as I did, but it is loose. I'll go ahead and back this off and see if I can go ahead and show this with one hand. The tool's out, and yeah, the upper control arm is free. However, I can't actually remove it, so yeah. I am gonna go ahead and take these four off, be able to drop the control arm down and get it off the bolt. All right, so as you can see, the upper control arm is loose from the car. These four 15 mil bolts, they're pretty straightforward. There's really nothing on the alignment side to worry about, so you no need to mark the location or whatever else. However, there are washers back behind the control arm, in between the control arm and the frame. Keep note of how many washers or which washers are coming off of which bolt, because that is going to affect your alignment and how everything else bolts together. So I don't have to remember. I just put all four of them back in exactly the way they came out. Now we've got this out, I've got upper control arm out. And again, for my sanity, because generally this starts to all run together, I just lay the part out the same way it came in the car. It is labeled F and rear, or F and R. However, I don't actually know where those are anymore. Ah, there it is. So can see the R for rear and F for front, and it came off just like this. So if you do forget, not the end of the world, but it is there. So now I've got upper control arm out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and press out the upper, and this lower is gonna be, I really have no idea how I'm gonna get that out. It's gonna be fun. All right, so hopefully this is gonna make sense for everyone. Took me longer than I want to admit to figure it out. But as far as using the ball joint press tool, so you can rent it from your local auto parts store, or you can buy it. Multiple stores have it. But effectively what we want to do is we want to basically push this ball joint out the top. However, using the tool, it's not so much pressing it out as it is pulling it out. And what I mean by that is you're gonna have your tool, and effectively you're gonna have the C going this way. You're gonna add some cups on the back side, and you're gonna be tightening your rod. So as you're tightening this rod, this is effectively going to be pulling the C up. And on the front side, or the top side, bottom side really, the ball joint side of it, that's where you're gonna have an additional cup. I'm gonna go ahead and try to get that set up so you can see the assembly of how I'm doing it. All right, so after thinking on this and making a post on Corvette forum, it was recommended to take these two upper bolts out, and hopefully that'll allow me to pull the hub forward, pulling that bolt in towards or away from the nut, allowing me to get the nut off. So yeah, that's gonna be the plan of attack. All right, so I just loosened these upper bolts, and just as the guy on Corvette forum mentioned, once you loosen those, I now have plenty of room to get this off. All right, went ahead and broke nut loose for the ball joint, and then it's a matter of separating the ball joint from the spindle. On C6, and I assume C5s and forward Corvettes, the ball joint separator tool will not work here. The shank of the ball joint is too wide, or it's a larger diameter as it tapers down towards the control arm. So it won't fit unless you grind away material on that ball joint separator tool. So I just use a 2-jaw puller. So I'm gonna slide it underneath and then tighten the bolt down, and that's gonna eventually pop this off of the ball joint. All right, so I got the 2-jaw puller underneath the hub, and it's just a 19mm on the threaded rod. Same thing as the ball joint tool. I'm pulling this off by tightening it down, just for the angles, and I don't want to do this with a ratchet. I've got a long extension going through the upper ball joint bore. I'm just gonna try to see if I can get that to tighten up with the impact. If you are doing it this way, make sure that nothing touches that bore, being that that is a machined and controlled surface. So yeah, do this carefully, or do it manually, or have a lower profile impact. All right, so I went ahead and it was really not as tight as the other one, or not as bound up as the driver's side. So my 1/4-inch drive impact made pretty quick work of this, and now we're off. So what I am gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take all of these bolts holding the hub on. I'm gonna take them all out, give them a quick clean, and then throw some fresh Loctite on them and retorque them to spec. and hopefully prevent this problem down the future. My guess is at some point in the next year or so, I'm gonna end up replacing these front hubs. All right, so if you couldn't see from the other clips earlier, this lower ball joint actually looks better than the driver's side, but it is gone. It is shot. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to tear some of this boot off just to get it out of the way. And what I did learn from the other side, that the pushing tool for the ball joint cup, so as this was to come down and as it will press the ball joint through, it doesn't have enough vertical distance to actually push it all the way through. So what I did was go to my local Advanced Auto, and it's not the right one. I grabbed a 3/4 inch drive. It's an 1 5/16", and that actually fits pretty damn well. I don't have any 3/4 inch drive tools, so I'm not really worried about damaging the socket. But I use this to go ahead and press it all the way through. I'm sure someone in a proper shop is screaming, no, don't do that, but it works. So here we go. All right, we've got the tool set back up. So what we're looking at is my 3/4 inch drive, 1 5/16" socket on top, medium cup, and yeah, so same thing. Instead of trying to push the ball joint out, we're really going to be pulling it out, because this side is fixed, is going to the underside of the control arm, where it's not contacting the ball joint at all. That side's fixed, and as I tighten this, this whole C is going to get pulled down towards the floor, meaning this is going to put all the force into this, and that is going to put all the force into the ball joint and pop out the bottom. Downside for all this is I don't have the vertical clearance to put an impact on this. So I'm gonna have a whole bunch of fun with the breaker bar in probably a couple minutes. On 4 inches. I'm not big on using 4 inches to break something loose. Pop through. And probably going to make a noise and startle me because it's too late at night right now. All right, so just got the bolts out. One of these things is not like the other, and this is the one that was loose. There's almost no evidence of there being any amount of Loctite on this. So yeah, insert bad words. All right, just about got things snugged up. End of the C. This is actually the install tool, but it has a hole through, so you can barely see it, but the ball joint's gonna be able to come straight through it. And got this bottom cup, need to adjust it a little bit so it's actually pushing flush. And I'm gonna use the good old 1/4 inch impact as long as I can. I'm gonna go ahead and do this with 2 hands, make sure I can hold it steady and make sure I'm pressing in straight. All right, so just got upper ball joint pressed all the way in, starting to back this off. Had to switch over to the breaker bar since the good old 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch adapter. It said I'm taking the weekend early, and I was left to chat. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get this spun the rest of the way off, and then go press in the lower ball joint on the car, and then start to reassemble. All right, on the lower ball joint install part, again, make sure that you've got everything centered up, and that the ball joint can slide straight through whatever adapters you have. And again, because my car is low with this long rod, yeah, I've got to use a ratchet to spin this all the way up. And once it gets too tough, I'm gonna have to switch over to breaker bar. All right, so reassembly. It's pretty much the opposite of the way stuff came off, mostly with less frustrations. Lower ball joint's in, boot goes over top. Just make sure it's seated well. If you do have a gap, that gap is just going to be there. So for example, that would be a gap. Make sure you get it seated. Should be good. Go ahead and drop this guy over top. And now we're gonna go ahead and put our washer, our castle nut, and then we will torque it to the spec. And then after we're at spec, if we don't have a space to put the cotter pin through, you go until the next opening that you're able to go into. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and torque that off camera. All right, so we've got the castle nut in and torqued. I'm gonna go ahead and feed the cotter pin through, and I'm gonna have to grab some pliers. Otherwise, lower ball joint is in. After that, I'm gonna go ahead and get the upper control arm and upper ball joint reconnected. And then I have not forgotten about this crusty tie rod. It's coming up, its turn is soon. All right, so bottom's torqued. Got the upper started. You do need to take, I think it's a 5 mil Allen on the ball joint itself to hold that in place while you tighten the nut the rest of the way. Before you do that, or before I do that at least, I'm gonna go ahead and get my upper control arm reconnected. And again, make sure that you do have each of your respective hardware, remembering how many washers were where. All right, home stretch. Suspension itself is retorqued, back to being done. So now all that's left is tie rod, putting the brake caliper and bracket back on, wheel on, car down, get alignment. Well, sounds like a lot, but for the work today, I've got probably 15 minutes left, which is great. So on the Bear bump steer outer tie rod replacement kit, it does give you two different torque values, for one for the upper, one for the lower. And again, I'm not gonna cover those, they are in the instructions. And they also do say to set it with the medium spacer on the top side of it, and then the rest would be down below. All right, as I'm starting to get close to my jam nut, I'm gonna go ahead and go 3 flats, so half a spin back towards it. 1, 2, 3. And that's where I was previously. So I'm gonna keep going, and it looks like